Does look like we've got quite a small session today to start with. A few more are coming in.
Okay, super.
We like small sessions, don't we?
Well, I think that it usually means people can get the most out of it. So let's get started. Let's say who we are and what we're doing in the schools that we work with. And please, let's keep the chat active. So don't hesitate to ask any questions. You can even, you've got the ability, if you're feeling like it and you want to say hello, put your cameras on, come on in, tell us how we can support you in your school setting. There will be a dedicated Q&A at the end, but there's something on your mind throughout, or if I'm saying something or Andy shows you something within eduu.school, just say, oh, hang on a minute, tell me more about that. We'd love that. So who am I? I'm Tara Jones. There I are, I've just appeared on your screen there. So I was a deputy head. I've been a curriculum lead. Currently, I think my job title, who knows what we can call it, but certainly a curriculum expert. But I usually introduce myself and I say I'm a bit like a cog. So with all my experience in school, the cog between school and business, helping develop services and making sure that those in school are getting the best deal and we're giving the best support. I think that might be interesting to tell you then some of the schools that we've worked with or who we work with. Lots of the relationships in the schools that we do work with start at webinars just like this. So it's quite often our first introductions, particularly because it's the first time some of our schools see or know or hear anything about eduu.school. But we work with primary schools, secondary schools, trusts, even I'm thinking today. So today I've spoken with an independent school, a primary school, and Andy, I believe you were working with some alternative provision today. So we have this huge range of schools and services that we work with, but our offering goes beyond just the product and eduu.school. It's about helping you, and through CPD. And time again, we're usually asked about curriculum and Ofsted. And that's why we put on these webinars. And quite often they become dynamic events where schools are saying specifically, in my setting, I know we're due Ofsted and we need some curriculum support with, and we'd love to help you and answer any of those questions. So as I say, drop those questions in the chat, let us know which subject you want the support with, and Andy and I will make sure that this is a dynamic session that supports you. But you have signed up here today with Ofsted. There we go. I was going to say next slide, but yeah, one step ahead of me, as always, Andy. Now, the Ofsted updates, I feel like we're always hearing updates, but we have now got the handbook, haven't we? And we've got the strategy and the summary from 2022 through to 2027. Lots of increase, I noted, with early years, curriculum staying hugely important, paramount to the inspection. And I won't spend too long here. I would just say to you, if you keep your eye on Edu Twitter, and if you're not already following Ofsted, and actually Ofsted on YouTube, there is so much guidance regularly coming out. They have started as well, more often, sort of doing webinars forward facing, similarly to the chats we're having today. And you'll hear Ofsted inspectors and people working within Ofsted sharing really important updates. And I wanted to start here and talk to you about some of the most recent updates around the inspection framework. So let's go there. Let's take it in and start thinking about the framework and unpicking it. Okay, Andy, I can't see the questions. If they do come in, please interrupt me at any point and I can answer questions.
So well, don't worry.
Oh, thanks so much. So some of the content I'll share here today was out of one of the primary webinar updates from the inspection framework, and that I think is still readily available on YouTube. It was free and helpful, and I found this really refreshing as somebody who's been working with curriculum for a long time, because the message felt no one's trying to catch you out. There was this collective message coming through about we've got to reduce the stress around inspection. And it was Chris Russell, who is the National Director of Education, and he was saying, look, nothing is hidden. The inspection framework's out there. Ofsted are regularly putting out blogs, etc. And one message was really clear: don't do things for us. Okay, that sort of putting on a show we may have heard about in the past. What was clear, they want to know your children, know and talk and spend a lot of time with your children, to see your school in action, your day-to-day, and inspectors will always focus on this. And with that curriculum in mind, what do your pupils know? What do they remember? What do they do? And one colleague I've worked with recently, Matt Nguyen, he was one of our previous panel experts because he'd just been through an Ofsted. So quite a few of the eduu.school schools that we work with have been through recent Ofsteds. So throughout tonight's webinar, I can share their experiences. But Matt really echoed that. He was the principal over at Holyhead Primary Academy. And he joined us and he talked about, you know what, my recent experience of Ofsted is it was fair. And we do have a Glue podcast where we capture his voice. And he said it was fair. They wanted to see how the school works, wanted to see what the children were doing. Now, as a principal, Matt would have been the person who took that first phone call, because we've got to look at the first phone call and how we start and gather the evidence. So we're going to unpick that Ofsted journey from the moment your school knows you've been inspected down to your time, I suppose, as subject lead, articulating your subject. So if we go to the next slide, let's look at this whole process, and then we'll dig down, or should I say deep dive, into the subject. So Jill Jones she's the Early Education Deputy Director. She used this word deep dive to represent methodology. She said, look, we just have to get to the heart of the effectiveness of the school curriculum. And the image you can see, that's the process. So there's going to be a contact to the school and a conversation with leaders. And that all connects back to the bigger picture. So the judgment area, you have this top level view, which is that early conversation. And the curriculum, the leaders will talk about all the learners, and then they'll actually be able to point to the direction of your subject or where the curriculum will focus, where the inspection will focus. And it's really important to note this. There's not a preferred curriculum method. In this top level view, this conversation prior to the deep dives, it's about an educationally focused conversation. And that's the day before the inspections begin. So the scene's been set, but it is through that top level view. I'm using the Ofsted terminology here time and time again. It's there that they make the decision and for the subject deep dive. So no doubt you can have a conversation with your head teacher and have some idea about where that deep dive is going to go, or where the school curriculum view and judgment you're going to be directing inspectors. And I found this particularly interesting, that Ofsted said, you know, it's not a subject inspection, which seems an odd thing to say, but it's rather a route in to get to the heart of the quality of education. So they'll take a selection of subjects and they will be looking for that common strength. So talking the talk, walking the walk is what you say is happening in your curriculum. If it happens in history, does it happen in geography? If it's happening in science, is it happening in maths? Where are the connections? And are we seeing this common strength that evidences that first conversation with the head teacher, the school intent, and what you're doing really well? So, as a subject lead, the conversation is to see what's happening in your subject. Is that in line with that conversation, that first conversation? What's common? What's different? And your start and your end points remain important. So what do the schools intend the children to learn? What does that look like? And then down to you as subject lead, how does that look within your subject? Okay, so we're always connecting back to the bigger picture.
Sorry, really sorry to interrupt you. Can I just ask, like, we work with quite a few schools, and there seems to be quite this kind of opinion around Ofsted about this kind of like almost big bad wolf kind of feel and things like that. From your experience of working in schools that you've been working with, how has that kind of changed recently?
Well, I think that the two heads that we spoke with recently, they did talk about it being a very fair process, but I think both, one used the word thorough, and I think the other actually used the word intense. So while I do think that we have the opportunity to be better prepared. So if we look back at this bigger picture and we think about, okay, first conversation, school intent, there should have been a lot of work happening in your school so you can be prepared for where the deep dive might go or for your curriculum conversations. So both heads echoed that the process was fair. They weren't caught off guard, but that the process was thorough. So I'm not sure whether they would then still think of Ofsted as kind of this big, I don't think so. I felt from both of them that they said, yeah, no, it was what we expected and it was fair, but you've got to know your subject inside out. And one thing actually that we could do and share today in the webinar, Andy, which will be really helpful, is example questions.
Yeah,
because, again, it helps that preparation. Be as armed as you can with as much information. And if you're here and you've joined today's webinar, you know, you're clearly on the right path. You're wanting to know more and you're here thinking, right, what's going to be going on in an Ofsted inspection and how can I be ready and how can I prepare? So you're here and hopefully we can help with that. But yeah, really.
Is there anybody that's here today during Ofsted very soon? Is that why they're here today? If you just post it in the chat and let us know. I see a hand up.
Yeah,
Hi, Emma.
Wave. Yeah, me.
That was a very panicked hand, wasn't it?
Yeah. Emojis. I was imagining that the head in hands.
Emma, what subjects do you lead? What are you expecting? You can just post it in the chat, don't worry, and I'll talk to you in the chat as we go through. Sorry, Tara.
No, well, actually, the next slide was it Emma you said? So
yeah.
Sorry, I can't see exactly. I didn't see Emma's hand.
Yeah, I did.
This will probably be really helpful then, and I might say to everyone, get your pen and paper.
History and Geography.
Oh,
so you got both of humanities.
Okay, Emma, we're going to be able to be super helpful. We've got some great questions to share with you.
Yeah. I'll put them in. I'll put them in the chat now. Just let me know if you can get hold of them as we go through.
Oh yeah, no worries, Emma. Well, Andy will post some questions in a moment. Oh, they're already there. But before you get distracted by those, still sticking with sort of curriculum, I want to share with you what I do know. So maybe grab your pen, or we will send out this recording if you can't. I'm sure no one can write as quickly as I talk. Actually, I always get told off for talking too quickly. But there's certain questions that Ofsted will ask. Okay. I think that these are also available. I talked about that Ofsted, some of the webinars and looking on YouTube. We're sharing best practice here. This is a community. You know, I get lots of information, keeping myself up to date with the training there. Have a look. But I've unpicked it for you. So Ofsted will ask about your school curriculum, and they will ask you, how is it organised? They'll want to know how your curriculum has been decided, and how the leadership of your curriculum, how it's been distributed or delegated. They really want to know how you're making it work at your school. They may even ask about leeway, what staff changes are allowed to happen. Okay, can staff make changes to the curriculum? What might that look like? They'll ask, certainly they'll ask about leaders, how they break up the curriculum into smaller chunks and how they put that into order. So, and the question here again, how do you order your curriculum and put it into smaller chunks so that your pupils know and remember more over time? Emma, if Ofsted don't say that to you on several occasions, I will eat my hat. They'll say, what have you done with your curriculum? And how have you ordered it successfully so that your pupils know and remember more over time? It's really important. Inspectors will want to know how you're supporting pupils with SEND, and also, and every school I think I've worked with, I'm talking about those that have been Ofsteded this academic year. There have been conversations about early career teachers. Why is that? No doubt because of COVID and the pandemic. So we have early career teachers, of course, coming into the curriculum who potentially have had very limited experience. So Ofsted will look to you as subject lead and say, are there early career teachers in your school setting and how are you supporting them? And what approaches do your schools use to support these staff? Now, very interestingly, if we can just go to the next slide there, Andy, Ofsted do not expect schools to design curriculum all by themselves. And I use this quote now in most training that I do. I think it was Dan Lambert who said this. He said, looking outside of your school gates will bear enormous fruit. And I think that's a key shift, a key change, and a difference that we've seen in the schools that we support. They've looked.
Tara, I completely testify to that.
Okay.
I was on a training session with a school yesterday, and they're part of Multi Academy Trust, and one of the schools has adopted eduu.school, and the second school were just about to start it. They'd spent 3 years developing their curriculum, spending that curriculum time as curriculum leaders, etc., sorting this out, and it doesn't need to be done. Doesn't need to be done. You can look at other things.
I think there's almost there was a conversation on Edu Twitter that I was interested in following, and someone said, I think we often ask teachers alongside their day-to-day teaching job to effectively author a textbook every year and to write a curriculum and to write the resources, and we're saying, okay, you need to be at the school before 8 a.m, look after the kids, we've got well-being, pastoral care, family, staff meetings, staff responsibilities, and then the expectation to be constantly writing really detailed curriculum resources. And so I'm using this word refreshing. Often we're saying, look, where can you go for the support? So again, some of the headlines, they've said work with other schools, use schemes of work, and use subject specialists. And that is where we can link back to eduu.school, because in fact, that would be interesting in the chat. If perhaps some of you here don't know anything about eduu.school, but eduu.school has been born out of a trust led by Sir Mark Grundy, an outstanding trust of schools with subject specialists. And they saw that let's get everybody together in a room, as you no doubt do in your own primary school, and we're going to start mapping out the curriculum. But what if you have several schools and several subject leads, and they come together and write the resources, and then you recognise that you've got a great set of resources? What we've done with eduu.school is we've put them into an online platform. So it's exactly that. Use subject specialists, use really good quality stuff, and then you make it work for your school. Well, it looks like Andy's going to take you into eduu.school. It's a really sensible idea.
I'm just talking. I'm just sharing as I'm talking.
Oh, fine.
So you feel free to carry on.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that we see a real difference in how schools use eduu.school. So some schools will say, okay, in order to really be better prepared, or where we are with our curriculum, we're going to go into eduu.school and pretty much use it as we see it. Other schools, sounds like the school you spoke to yesterday, Andy, have spent 2-3 years planning their curriculum, and they've done a lot of the work, but might just want to enhance it with some really quality resourcing. And to do so aesthetically, we've got some really great handouts. Digitally, we've got some fantastic resources. So we've seen a real difference in how schools use eduu.school. Now, my next slide, I feel like we've derailed slightly, Andy, but
back on.
Oh, there we go. We were going to take a look at some of the questions. So, Andy, I think you've shared them in the chat, and hopefully...
I've tried to share them in the chat. A few attendees have said that they weren't able to download them, so they will be emailed to you. Everybody in the chat, I know you. If you're unable to download them, they will be emailed to you at the end of the session as well. James just said it's already been sent, so you've actually already received them via email as well. Tara, I can show the full version if you'd prefer.
No, that's fine. That's speedy. If James has sent them out, that's fine. Yeah, I told you it's teamwork here. No, so this is one of our schools that were Ofsteded a couple of months ago now, and the head there. I can't begin to explain how important I think this is when you have a community, regardless of you're in eduu.school or not. The head there got all his staff, as soon as they'd been through Ofsted, he said, like, write your questions down. let's talk about them afterwards. So we had the meeting with the leader and then meeting with staff after lessons. So if you've not received it, this is a bit of a golden nugget coming your way, because we've recorded those and we've looked at the questions. And it's interesting, you're going back to the big picture. Think about that image and that conversation about school intent. And I said the questions are quite deliberate about how you've organised the curriculum. So look at that first question there with the leader. So you've met with your subject lead, you guys. Who chooses what's taught in history curriculum and why? So saying, how's this been decided and who's made the choices? Again, we've got how we're supporting children, what CPD has been offered to staff to support with history. And again, I'll bring you back. We've had lots of conversations. How are you supporting staff that aren't subject specialists, that might be early career teachers? What are your development points? What are your strengths? You've just got to know your subject inside out. And interestingly, we then have the staff after lessons. And if you look, which I think is really key again here, and this is, I know, I think these might have been lifted yesterday. These are our history questions, but applicable to many of the areas, and some of the other areas you will have been emailed will be similar questions about what was your prior lesson, where are you going next? So the order and the sequence, and how very important it is to understand what you've taught in that lesson when Ofsted were there, why you've taught it, what was taught before, and what's coming next. And all the while connecting that back to your curriculum, your intent. What are you doing to make sure that your children know and remember more?
You can apply these to any subject, we can't to a degree. I mean, you could take the word history out of many of these and apply them to your subject. I can see Emma frantically typing away because I'm sure she's looking at geography at exactly the same time as well. Many of these, I'm sure, are completely interchangeable with your subject as well, particularly the after your lesson as well.
Yeah. We do know that we had lots of our sign-ups that were history leads, so we had actually prepared, and I've highlighted there. And Andy, perhaps you can now take us into eduu.school and we'll have a little look and then come back to the curriculum conversation. Chronology, I've highlighted that question, that how do you ensure chronology is taught and understood by children? I think even if that's a takeaway actually from today, understood. So it's not, our children can't be passive. We know that. Are they understanding? Are they remembering? And even in that one question, it wasn't tell me about chronology in the curriculum. It was how do you ensure chronology is taught and understood? I think if you're preparing and looking at these questions, so what do they want to see? They want to know that we're teaching it, we're delivering it, but that my children are going to understand what's been taught and remember. So should we take a look at chronology in eduu.school?
Yeah, it's in and it's on. Is it showing for you now? Is it?
It is, yeah. Well, I'll hand over to you, Andy.
Yeah, please do, no problem. So I'm going to talk a little bit about chronology today, and this is mainly based upon talking to one of the schools that use eduu.school at the moment. And this is actually directly from their actual Ofsted. So I'm kind of repeating what he's been said. And after the session, what we'll share with you to listen back, maybe on your way home, for example, we'll share with you a short little podcast that we recorded, which was with the head teacher of the head principal of this school, and he kind of went into a lot more detail as to what those questions that we've sent you, the kind of the context for that as well. So maybe give that a listen afterwards, after you've listened to us, if you're still feeling in an Ofsted mood as we go through. Now, the first thing to know with chronology is that it's all about starting it early on. This is what the school were discussing. Just discussing about the fact that I'm looking at Key Stage 1 here, and it's looking about when did chronology start being talked about with students? And from their Ofsted, they essentially discussed the fact that it was starting as early as possible. Now, we all know that it's really important to sequence your curriculum at Key Stage 1, talking about things that are within living memory. And then it's talking about things within your living memory very early on, that children are able to remember, perhaps things that didn't happen that long ago. But at Key Stage 2 is talking about things in chronological order. moving further along. I'll go into one of the themes and just show you what chronology looks like within School. But I think the most important thing to note about School is the fact that it's all connected, that it's all together, and it's all about working through the themes as you go through. Now, I'm going into Amazing Animals here, which is probably not where you'd expect to actually find any kind of chronology. As the name suggests, it's kind of focusing on science and art and the natural world and things like that, rather than history involved in history of animals. But the thing with School, but we've tried to include, and this is what Ofsted noticed during their inspection, was that chronology is just as important within those subjects that aren't history related. So School is thematic, as you probably can see from what I'm showing you. But if we go into the people, place, and time resources, I know Tara, you're extremely passionate about these resources, and I'm sure you feel free to chime in as we go through. What this kind of does is link everything together. It's talking about the key time periods, the key places, and then the actual people as well associated with that theme. And I'm going to use a little soundbite, a little tidbit that this school really noticed with Ofsted, and what Ofsted really quite liked was the fact that all of these kind of formed a triangle. And I'm going to try and do it, Tara, exactly the same as our colleague did it for his inspection. He basically explained to us that during the inspection, they spoke about the fact that the time period is linked to the places is linked to the people, and it forms some sort of triangle between them, and they link throughout. I'll just go into one of the resources. Tara, do you want to say anything about what these are going to look like as I go through?
Yeah, I suppose we know the platform quite well.
You do.
So what you've seen there in a snapshot is each theme is very well organised, and you have all of your planning and a planning overview. It's very well resourced, and the people, place, and time, you've got your significant individuals in history for every theme, whatever the subject focus might be, so whether it's led by science, geography, or history. Significant individuals, you look at a world map and you think, so if you were doing mummified, an ancient Egyptian theme, do stay here though, Andy, and just giving the example, you would see, okay, well, what was going on? You can't explore the history of ancient Egypt as a civilization without thinking about the Nile and the importance of the Nile and the geography and the places. And you look at the time and the chronology within that period of time, but also an understanding of it's not just the world history, it's about in any period of time and what is time and what can happen at the start point and end point. You can see here, sorry, I'm just looking at my screen, we're looking again and becoming very clear with our children that chronology and time and how time affects everything around us and what we do, it becomes part of the bread and butter and the daily diet for the children, and the resources do that very, very well. I also think that many of our schools have really liked the cohesion and the uniformity.
Making connections, isn't it?
Yeah. So whatever theme you go into has this triangulation of people, place, and time. So we were just looking there at Amazing Animals.
I'll go into key stage
1. Yeah, if you look into key stage 2,
and we'll go for a very historical based theme this time.
Exactly what I was going to say, Andy. I'll leave you to it. I'll stop into.
Yeah, if we go into Romans, feel free to chime in, Tara, don't worry, it's no problem. If we go into Romans, which, as you can imagine, is a very historical based theme, it's still exactly the same. It's all laid out very similar. It's about making connections throughout the actual themes themselves, and the fact that they are all connected together through people, place, and time, but perhaps most importantly, through the actual connection of children recognize or can recognize, which is a really, really hard thing to do, that things do go in a chronological order throughout their learning. And you may look at your curriculum and you may think, yeah, we teach things in a perfectly chronological order. That's absolutely fine. But do they associate the fact that the prehistoric period, the Jurassic period, for example, is extremely long compared to, for example, the Roman period, which we're talking here, in comparison to each other? I think back, Tara, to that very stereotypical lesson that we've all done of going into a playground with a piece of chalk or some kind of item to hold and physically mapped out that timeline. And that's what we recommend. That's what we
Yeah.
recommend. It's really simple, but it does work.
And Andy, I mentioned about schools that are a bit further on. Oh, if you go back there, sorry, to the significant, anyone, pick a different theme. Let's look at the significant people during, around the world. I mentioned that some schools are taking all of the planning and the resources and using it to enhance their curriculum. Well, sorry, using it to set, I suppose, their curriculum and their ordering. Others are using to enhance. And if we look at the significant individuals, the people at the top there, you'll see the quality of the resourcing. And for example, during this theme, which is around the world, geography focus, you've got QR codes in the corner of resources. Now I've seen them in a lesson where the children have finished their task or where they were up to, they've got their iPads and they're driving their learning by going and picking a significant individual, scanning the QR code and developing learning. So the level and the quality of the resourcing leads itself to naturally extend and challenge many of our learners and pupils. Now,
I know, Tara, we've got a huge amount of very different subject leads here today. I know you weren't in the chat earlier, but we've got science leads, we've got reading and phonics leads here today. We've got all sorts, really, to be honest, of different subject leaders, which is fantastic. And we've just spoke about history there, and we are getting to a point where we're nearly about 10 minutes left of the session. What I would love to offer people in the chat at the moment is an opportunity to kind of speak to us again at another opportunity. If we've not covered your subject in enough detail, we do offer really kind of short bespoke sessions to your actual school. If you want to talk to us again about your particular subject, maybe we didn't cover it in enough detail today, because we are going to get to questions in a moment. If we didn't cover it in enough detail, please join us for one of those. We've got a really quick system signing up for it, and you'll just get a nice kind of Zoom link and you'll just join us there. I'll post that in the chat now whilst Tara goes on.
Yeah, that's how our community's grown, hasn't it, Andy? That people have said, or they've heard a little bit about eduu.school, and then we've been able to say, well, let's have a quick chat, or you can, Andy has this Calendly. I always find that hard to say, a Calendly link that you can click on and think, do you know what, I've got my PPA next Wednesday and I want to look at this just for my school setting. So Andy could take you in and show you in detail. But why don't we take a look at Galaxy Quest, Andy, if you're saying that we've had some science leads. So just on the theme introduction that you can see on your screen at the moment, every theme has an introduction and it will tell you what the focus is. So Galaxy Quest, it's space, it's learning, it's focused on science, but it also includes geography, art, history and music. And I suppose where my expertise has come into helping schools with curriculum mapping, I've done that with quite a few different school settings prior to coming into this role, is that you might look at the thematic curriculum and think, how am I going to make this with the subject leads on my whole school curriculum map? We can very quickly take your existing map and see where eduu.school threads in. And one science teacher wasn't sure at first, I can be totally honest, and I'm not sure that we've got enough of the coverage. Once you start going into the themes and unpicking it, you can see the quality of the science teaching. So the explores, this is quite a bit like a knowledge organizer. If we just stop there for a moment, we follow this theme of excite and explore and then excel. So we also have assessment built in. So if we have any assessment leads on the call, that would be music to your ears. We simply can't get through it all in one 45-minute webinar. So again, we'd love to show you the assessment. But a theme starts with excite. You're going to engage the pupils, tell them all about the theme. You then work through your explores, which in many ways are your lessons. And then we go into the excel, the opportunity for children to show through assessment or through an activity what they've achieved through that theme. So here we were looking at the overview, the lessons, the breakdown of the lessons. They might tell me off for calling them lessons, but that is what it is. Ultimately, is that okay, Andy, to say lessons? Yeah.
They are lessons, yes.
Yeah. And what we've not mentioned yet, you'll see there down in the bottom right corner, we also have in every theme a wellbeing lesson. So when you talk about your curriculum, the way that it's organised and sequenced, this is where very cleverly we've worked with clinical experts, we've worked with charities thinking about wellbeing and mental health to map that through the curriculum. So here in this year 5 science-based theme, we're going to learn all about the galaxy. about space, lots of science, but we're also going to take the opportunity to talk about stress, and we think about stargazing, a guided meditation, and actually within and through every theme, we see wellbeing opportunities mapped.
There are at least 2 or 3 wellbeing opportunities per theme, you see. So it is mapped completely throughout.
I always anecdotally give there's a creepy crawlies theme in Key Stage 1, and you know how many years, anyone who's taught year 1 and year 2, we've done mini beasts. So see, this is the same theme, introduction page here. Creepy crawlies is a theme about mini beasts. It focuses on science, but also includes geography, art, and DT. So you've probably all taught mini beasts, been outside on a hunt, made a mini beast hotel, but the wellbeing lesson here explores phobias. And it's a lesson, even in is this one year 2 or year 1? I know it's Key Stage 1. Look at me, I'm leaning in for the small point. There's an opportunity with really young children to say, well, have you ever heard of what might be a phobia here? What if somebody had a fear in the class? How could we support them? And it seems really obvious, doesn't it? But wellbeing hasn't necessarily had the priority in the curriculum that it should have. And I think it's great to see it in and through every single one of our themes. We've only left about 5 minutes for Q&A. So
the reason we're so passionate about it is because it's fine. I know it's fine. We always do it. The reason we're so passionate about EduSchool and talking about it is because we know it works. The reason we're sharing it is because of, fortunately, we do have to look at Ofsted, and the reason we are looking at this and why we're all here in the first place is because this came out very well from an Ofsted inspection. So we'll go on to Q&As because we are vastly.
And I suppose, Andy, the more schools that you and I have worked with, the bigger benefit we're seeing now, and we're starting to have that feedback, and we've got schools who might have been using it through this academic year, or, as I've told you, schools who have now been through Ofsted. I wonder whether, I know that we had some questions coming in advance as well, and one of the questions that came through was about teacher workload. And I would say, Andy, that's been one of our biggest and most positive feedback, is that workload feels reduced and the opportunity for quality first teaching, and to think, I know I've got great resourcing now for my upcoming theme, so I'm going to be teaching ancient Greece, and that's coming up after, we're in summer too, we're completely exhausted. You have your half term, you've got lots of other work to do, you know you've got great quality resourcing, and you can spend a bit of time saying, okay, how am I going to tweak and now adapt this for my class? Can I look up local history, link it to my locality, tweak and adapt? But with regard to workload, the heavy lifting is done.
I was talking to a really forward-thinking head teacher yesterday, where I was delivering a training, and after we'd spoken about EduSchool, very similar to what you guys have just seen now, but in more detail about general practice, general classroom use, and how to actually make use of EduSchool properly. The head teacher said at the very end, guys, we've got this, so you don't have to spend your time doing your planning. That's what she said. And I just sat there and just went, just the hats off. That's what it's meant to be for, really. It's very hard to juggle workload. We know that. We know it's really hard, but it's hopefully something we can help with. We've already had a few sign-ups for Calendly, so thank you those that have already signed up and want to continue this discussion moving forward as part of our community. It's really brilliant.
Brilliant. And I do know that we had a few things that we did want to share. We may follow up with an email. So we have some free lessons as well that could be helpful. So perhaps if you'd like some example PowerPoints and lesson resources, if you were either to sign up to Andy's Calendly or drop in the chat now, and you could just say, yeah, please, maybe even your theme. You might be thinking now to Autumn 1. I know I'm going to be teaching the Romans next year. Can you send me example lessons? Could we do that too, Andy?
Yeah, we'll send you a follow-up email anyway with things like the podcast and basically anything we've discussed during this session anyway. I know James has already sent you the Ofsted questions. But if you'd like any kind of free lesson content that we can give you, just to try and, like you say, we're talking about workload. If it takes a little bit of workload away from you, just let us know. You can either sign up for a Calendly or you can just post in a chat now and just say, yes, please, or lesson.
I just wondered, Andy, as well, about any of our year 6 teachers. We've got some of those lovely, the post-SATs project on the EduSchool. So if anyone's in year 6 and we've got a lovely...
or indeed one of their teachers.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Or you can share it with a colleague. Yeah. Quite right, Andy. We have a really nice sort of a few weeks work linked to transition. It looks at the song, This Is Me. Oh, hi, Deborah. I'll come back to that in a moment. Linked to This Is Me, looking at, aspirations and who you are, sort of that preparation. And I know that we've got almost a 3 or 4 as a bunch of lessons. So you might just be a total lifesaver to your year 6 colleague and say, hey, do you want a few weeks of work? I can share that with you. So what's Deborah saying? Some example content? Absolutely.
Yeah, of course we will.
Oh, and you've just developed thematic. Oh, well, that's a chat that I'm sure Andy would love to have.
Do you like a bit of thematic chat?
I think we should let our I think we should let our lovely colleagues go and enjoy the sunshine. And thank you all so much for joining us. I know we started off heavy, but the Ofsted curriculum questions. I wonder if I can post my notes in the chat actually about what Ofsted will ask.
You might be able to, just before we let you go, guys. We would love it if you could please just fill in the quick poll that's coming up on the screen. Thanks, Kay, for the feedback. We're glad it's been really helpful. If you could just fill in this poll, it just makes, we talk about our mental health and well-being and things like that. If you could just fill in these quick just three really quick questions just for you to fill in.
I hope there's not a free text box where they say Tara can't pronounce Calendly.
Well, no, there isn't.
Because I can't.
I got rid of that one last time.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
If you could just fill that in, just let us know how you've got on. That would mean a lot to us. And if you do have any questions you think of after the session that we haven't answered, you'll receive an email from myself afterwards, and just give me a reply from there, and we'll more than happily.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Andy. So I'll collate a few of my notes, because I recognise that slide where I talked about curriculum was probably a bit wordy, and you could put that into the email too.
Great.
So it'll just say Tara's curriculum questions, basically what Ofsted will ask.
Looks like you can receive quite a big email, guys.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's all right. I know how extensive your notes are, and I'm sure everybody would benefit from them. So, but thank you everybody for joining us. I really appreciate your time on this Tuesday afternoon and evening. Please go enjoy what's left of your day. And we really, really hope to hear from you soon. Really hope to continue these conversations in the future. And thank you those that have filled out the form as well. It's really appreciated.
And Andy, I wonder if it'd be useful for schools to understand that if they do have that meeting with you and you come on and show them around, you can also send them away with a login so they can have a play on eduu.school and explore it for themselves with their team, perhaps.
Yep, of course we can. We can set you up instantly. But just a few thank yous coming into the chat. Thank you, Deborah. Thanks, Simone. Thank you so much, Kay. Thank you for joining us. It's really it's been a really nice interactive session. So thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tara, and welcome. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Emma. See you soon.